Hi everyone, I'm Julie. I decided to do my final project and presentation on Fairtrade. I've been a consumer of Fairtrade for quite a few years, but I've never really actually looked into what goes into Fairtrade. So I'm focusing on the pros and cons of Fairtrade and some forward thinking involved in the movement. So the social movement of Fairtrade began in the United States in the 1940s when an organization began purchasing needlework from Puerto Rico. And from there, the growth really stemmed from a response to poverty and disaster around the world. By the late 1960s, there were quite a few organizations that were developed to help import goods, to help empower the farmers and workers, and to provide a good price for their goods, and to develop awareness and education for the public regarding the benefits of fair trade. And with all of this movement advancement in the 1960s, a true definition came out of fair trade, and it's enabling sustainable development and community empowerment by cultivating a more equitable global trade model that benefits farmers, workers, consumers, industry, and the earth. And it's really impressive and inspiring that an entire community's day-to-day life can be improved by every single purchase that we as consumers can make. But with that said, fair trade was not intended to single-handedly solve world poverty issues. As I mentioned, a number of organizations were formed to help support the fair trade movement. 3 are listed on the left. They are Fairtrade USA, Fairtrade International, and World Fair Trade Organization, and they're pretty prominent and pioneering nonprofit organizations, and they benefit the consumer, producer, and the planet. And I will be focusing on the pros and cons of the producer, consumer, and the planet because they are the 3 stepping stones and the beneficiaries of the whole fair trade movement. These organizations have also set standards to ensure and promise that their values are being accomplished and delivered. Some of their values include fairness, community, personal development, innovation, sustainability, integrity, and empowerment. Oops, sorry about my slides. Forward thinking and strategic framework is also imperative for the fair trade movement and organizations to maintain their market position. And the small and large ideals must be recognized and addressed in order for there to be stability and improvement in the fair trade movement. According to Fairtrade International, from 2013 to 2015, the entire fair trade system came together and was behind a focused framework. I don't know how typical that is, but I did find when I researched all of these organizations that most of them had very similar goals. So it makes sense for a number of them to come together and have communal goals for this 2 years span. So they focus on 4 main pieces of framework, those being world-class work with smallholders, driving real change for workers, growing the grassroots social movement and the market, and to strengthen the global fair trade system. Now, even with all of these goals and outlooks of the organizations, there are also critics who have concerns of the long-term effects of fair trade, even though they don't necessarily disagree with the humanitarian intents and the positive impacts of fair trade. Some reviewers just question the practices of fair trade. So, like I mentioned, I focused on the pros and cons of the producer, consumer, and the planet. So, just like the trail of the system, it starts with the producer, so we'll start with the producer here. There are actually an amazingly amount of benefits that the producers gain from fair trade. At the same time, producers seem to have the most negative aspects related to them when it came to analyzing the producer, consumer, and planet. But when it comes to the pros of the producers, Quite a few are listed here, and this is a compilation of all of the organizations. Like I mentioned, they had so many of the same goals that there's a lot of crossover, which is good. But Fairtrade increases annual incomes of small farmers. It helps put in place tools for self-sufficiency, assists small farmers to stay out of high-interest debt, and helps build infrastructure in farming communities. It also advocates for an end to child and forced labor and trafficking, and the producers gain skills and knowledge to develop their business, improve environmental methods, receive social premiums that support community projects, and they have access to low-cost technical assistance. One big thing, though, I noticed with all of the positives and benefits that come out of everything that the producer gains is that there's an overarching goal of all the organizations, and that is mainly to create an opportunity for economically disadvantaged producers throughout the world. So when you look at negatives of the producer, they were kind of all over the board. Some critics claim that there's no focus on mechanization and industrialization, and this is really something that might allow farmers in developing countries to break out of the poverty cycle, where some critics think that fair trade actually just keeps them in just above water, out of that poverty cycle. Some critics also think there's an emphasis on an agricultural cooperative, and this would discriminate against smaller farmers. And some of these cooperatives have been accused of mishandling the fair trade revenue. Also, some fair trade organizations have been said to cheat farmers in a way that they pay them, or that they pay them too little. And overall, there seems to be some agreement that fair trade is an incorrect method to help the third world nations' farmers and their economies suffer. So the next couple slides are pretty interesting in relation to fair trade and the numbers that come out of fair trade. You can see how different products, how many different products are produced, how many consumers have seen the fair trade mark, how much land is used, and the millions of, in this case, euros are spent and paid towards the fair trade industry. And I really like this chart because it kind of brings all the information together and gives you a snapshot of every hand that would touch the fair trade movement. This next slide is just a distribution of the fair trade farmers throughout the world, and it's, as some of you may know, it's pretty heavy in Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa and the Middle East, and in Asia. So the numbers are just broken down here, and in my research I found that most of the consumers are actually in the grayed out areas around all of these three other colors. So the next group that I analyzed was the consumer. And the consumer benefits may not have the same concrete and visible benefits as the producer, but the fair trade purchases provides a more socially responsible feeling, and one of social justice. And mainly this is assisting and empowering others via our own purchase power. So with every purchase we make, we're empowering somebody else to keep doing what they're doing and to improve themselves. Another thing that I realized was that there is more consumer awareness out there than I was even aware of, and there's a lot of growth. According to a company called the Nielsen Company, there was a rise in the percentage of global consumers willing to reward companies that give back society, and the study focused on about 30,000 global socially conscious consumers in 58 countries, and there was a change from 45 to 50% in 1 year. So the graph on the right actually shows over the course of the 1 year how the percentage of people who are willing to spend more based on the companies that are more socially responsible. So when I was looking at all the negatives, I actually couldn't find a lot, which maybe is a really good thing. But all the negative effects seem to be centered around advertising and marketing, and how certain companies, like the ones listed on the top, are kind of branding themselves with the fair trade movement. It's not all bad, as you have probably experienced. Most of them really try hard to market themselves in a very positive manner, but some have busted out ads like the one on the right, blatantly saying don't buy this jacket based on everything that the jacket involves, yet nowhere on the ad does it say why we shouldn't purchase it. And other things that have come up are different slogans from like Fairtrade USA, who just put out there, how ethical is your shopping basket? And it basically implies that non-fair trade products are unacceptable and unethical, which is not always the case, and most of us are pretty aware of that. Our final step comes with the pros and cons of the planet. When I was doing my research, I found this graphic on the left, and I thought it was perfect for tying everything together when it comes to the producer, consumer, and the planet. And in the end, it all comes down to the earth and what we're trying to maintain. So when we think about all the positives that the farmers and producers are doing for the planet, they are everything from water resource management to soil fertility, not using genetically modified organisms, preventing of clear-cut forestry and areas for small farmers. But on the other hand, that's one of the negatives for large farmers, that negative being clearing out fields for production, which ultimately eliminates natural systems of pest control, and it also depletes soil while modern chemicals and modern tilling are being used. However, there are so many more positives that outweigh that, like encouraging producers to engage in environmentally friendly practices and encouraging and rewarding organic methods. The organic methods are not necessarily required, but like I said, they are encouraged, and more organizations are really pushing for that. Another big thing is encouraging planting of products such as coffee in a shade-grown area, and this is assisting in protecting certain birds. And it goes back to that whole clear-cutting idea too. When you start clear-cutting everything, you're not only eliminating the natural system, but also you're affecting species and where they're going to end up, if they end up anywhere that could help them sustain life. In the end, there actually aren't very many negatives known about the effects of fair trade on the planet, but one that we do need to consider is the transportation of goods. Many farmers live in remote areas, so transportation is pretty limited, and sometimes there needs to be a middleman involved to get the produce or whatever product it is to a larger source of transportation. This just adds cost. And I guess the question would be is if fair trade in a situation like that is really profitable for everyone involved, from the producer to the consumer, if that product could be made locally and we could save on transportation. So I found it very interesting when I was doing this report that I came across this graphic that October is actually Fair Trade Month, so I thought my research was pretty timely. I learned a lot about its movement and how widely accepted it really is, and how highly supported the fair trade movement truly is. Yet improvements and continuation in supporting need to continue in order for the fair trade movement to remain in our society and remain prominent for all the communities that it really affects. So with that said, I hope you learned a little something, and I'm looking forward to your feedback on what I can add or improve, and I thank you for your time. Thank you.